Okay, good afternoon, everybody. This is Shannon Bennett with the State Immunization Program. I think in the interest of time, we should go ahead and get started. Just want to do an audio check. My team's telling me that they can't hear me real well. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Word pharmacy.
Yes. Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you so much, you guys. So my name's Shannon Bennett, and I oversee the Nevada State Immunization Program. We really appreciate you guys taking some time out of your extremely busy schedules to talk with us about the COVID-19 vaccine distribution plan for the state of Nevada. We really appreciate your partnership, and as we've been telling our partners and our staff for months now, that this is going to be an all hands on deck approach. So we really appreciate you guys joining the call with us today. So I am going to walk through the overall response from Nevada's perspective. We have a lot of our subject matter experts on the call from the Nevada State Immunization Program today, and we'll be talking through some of the details about the vaccine, the timeline, how we anticipate pharmacies being engaged in the state of Nevada, a little bit about vaccine storage and handling, because there's some interesting vaccines that may be coming our way here in the not so distant future. A little bit about data reporting and what some of the requirements are going to be. And then we are also going to talk about vaccine clinical trials and what is expected with this vaccine, some of these vaccines coming out shortly. So on Friday, October 16th, the state of Nevada submitted our version of the playbook for COVID-19 vaccine distribution. I heard one of my colleagues in another state say that this was like building the frame of a house, and now we need to put all the furniture into it. And I think that is exactly what the case is. We have a basic idea of the way that we anticipate COVID-19 vaccine to be distributed and partners being engaged across the state. But now we are really hoping to move on to some of our next steps and really being able to beef up the plan and engage our partners and really come up with a comprehensive strategy for the way COVID-19 vaccines will be distributed across the state of Nevada. I do want to bring to your attention that this particular link on the screen right now is the CDC jurisdictional playbook, the guidance that they put forth for states and local jurisdictions to consider in their writing. And it is available publicly. The Nevada State Plan is not available publicly yet, although we anticipate some version of it being publicly in the future. But there's a lot of information in here that may be helpful for partners as we take a deeper dive into the vaccine planning. So let's talk a little bit about the timeline itself. So at the beginning of this vaccine response, we anticipate the doses available to the state of Nevada to be limited. We, however, expect the vaccine allocation to increase dramatically in a relatively short amount of time. So I think as we tip into the calendar year 2021, we're going to be in a much different situation regarding vaccine allocation and the doses of vaccine allocated to the state of Nevada than we will be in at the beginning. And really where this circle is on the graph is where I think we're going to be engaging a lot of our partners on the call today. It's important to note on this slide as well that the phased approach to this piece. So the first phase, we anticipate vaccine doses to be limited. The second phase is really where the supply meets the demand. And then the third phase, and I've even seen some slides with the fourth phase, is shifting into routine vaccination. We don't yet know what that looks like, whether this is going to be an annual vaccine or at some period, some interval in between. We really don't know what that's going to look like. But it's important for us to acknowledge that we will be shifting into some sort of regular routine vaccination in the future. So the first vaccines that we're being told will be available to the state of Nevada, there are 6 currently in contract with the federal government and that are being manufactured right now. 5 of those 6 vaccines are 2-dose series. The first 2 that we're anticipating to be available to us are, one is frozen and one is ultra cold, which is -70°C. We're focusing a lot of effort on that one right now for obvious reasons, as we've never had to distribute anything like that historically. We anticipate that some federal facilities and some corporate chain pharmacies will be receiving their own allocation of COVID-19 vaccine, and tribal jurisdictions also have the option to choose between receiving vaccine through Indian Health Services or through the state allocation, and we're working with tribal partners to make those determinations. All other immunizing providers must be enrolled in the Pandemic Provider Program through the Nevada State Immunization Program and will receive vaccine through our program. So we will be talking through some of those details today and are happy to take questions at the end. So it's important to note that vaccine will be very limited at the beginning. Its vaccine allocation, again, is going to increase quickly as we head into 2021. That is what's being projected right now. So because we're anticipating the vaccine to be limited at the beginning, there will be a phased rollout to this vaccine, focusing in on healthcare workers, critical infrastructure employees, and then moving on to older adults, adults with underlying health conditions, etc. And we have this tiered priority structure built out with flexibility for the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices recommendations when they make that after the vaccine has been released. And then I wanted to mention in here as well that CVS and Walgreens will be serving long-term care facilities if the long-term care facilities elect to work with that particular pharmacy. So again, I just wanted to talk about the timeline and talk about where we are at on the timeline right now. So we are way, way over on the left-hand side, still in clinical trials, still trying to work through everything as to how this is going to roll out in the state of Nevada. So where we are currently at is we launched our enrollments yesterday. We invited our local health authorities to enroll in the Pandemic Provider Program for the state of Nevada. And we are also anticipating that there will be our local community health nursing offices, acute care hospitals, and any other identified provider that will be serving some of these frontline health workers to be enrolled in the not so distant future, as we are anticipating vaccine relatively soon coming into the state of Nevada. So the current efforts, as we're focused in on healthcare workers and some of those critical infrastructure employees, those current efforts are extremely focused. And those decisions on who is being enrolled as pandemic providers are joint decisions with our local community leaders, our emergency managers, and our local health authorities. So you, I'm sure, are asking yourselves, where and when do pharmacy partners, when will they be engaged with this COVID-19 vaccine rollout for the state of Nevada? So really, I think the circle kind of answers the question. I also want to point out that, each provider that we will be enrolling into the state of Nevada has to go through an entire process. So if the chain pharmacy is not large enough to be enrolled at the federal level, we will be working with those pharmacy partners to be able to enroll them at the state level, but it's a process and there's only so many of us to get everyone enrolled. So I want to ensure you that we have plans to enroll our pharmacies and work with you guys on storage and handling and all of those things that are necessary. But it's going to be a phased approach, and it's going to have to be taken one piece at a time. So pharmacies that are not enrolled by the federal government will likely be engaged by us in early to mid phase 2 as we start opening up that vaccine allocation and we start preparing to vaccinate larger quantities of people, and it's not so targeted. At the beginning, as I mentioned, we are anticipating it being very targeted efforts of our healthcare workers and our critical infrastructure employees. Exceptions to that will be a community by community assessment at first, with plans to enroll all pharmacies in the future. So if there's a community that's struggling with access, a particular pharmacy may be reached out to earlier. But as I said, I want to make sure that you guys understand that if you are not being enrolled by the federal government, there are plans to work with all of you that are interested in it over time. And pharmacies could be engaged earlier if there's a community that's struggling with access. So that's a big piece to this whole puzzle as well. And that would be as needed basis. So with that, I think I'm going to kick it over to Glenn to talk about vaccine storage and handling. Glenn, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, and then I will just run the slides for you guys.
Okay, I did. Can you hear me? Okay, so the two vaccines that Shannon had mentioned was the ultra cold vaccine, which is going to be a very difficult vaccine to deal with through the whole process, just because of the nature of how it's shipped and how it has to be stored at that minus 70-degree temperature. It will allow for storage in a refrigerator at 2 degrees to 8 degrees Celsius up to 5 days before it has to be used. And then once it's reconstituted, it needs to be used within 6 hours. That's vaccine A, and that's the most difficult one to deal with. The second one is vaccine B, which is just a frozen vaccine, as Shannon had mentioned. And it just needs to be stored. It'll come to you within in a package at minus 20 degrees Celsius, and it could be stored in just a regular freezer. Once it's going to come in a group of 10 vials, and once it's reconstituted, it has to be used within 6 hours as well. Now, to reconstitute it, you have to let it thaw out for at least 30 minutes at room temperature. That's for both vaccines. Okay, and then the CDC has put out guidelines that these vaccines must be stored, and you must use a data logger to monitor the temperatures for that refrigerator or for the freezer. There are several different types of data loggers out there. Most of you probably already have some type of data logger, I'm assuming, on your refrigerator or your freezer. Once we determine whether that data logger can be used, the main thing is it needs to be 24/7 temperature monitoring, and it has to be able to print out some type of report showing min-max temperatures as well as a 24-hour temperature for the whole month. And as long as your system is able to do that, then we probably will be able to accept that data logger as a temperature monitoring device. And that's pretty much it, Shannon.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. And Mandy, I'll kick it over to you to talk about data.
Thank you. Whoop, I think we went, there we go. Hi, everybody. I'm Mandy Harris. I oversee Nevada WebIZ, which is our statewide immunization information system, or IIS. As such, I am charged with ensuring complete, accurate, and timely vaccination data reporting for our state. So complete data entry will be absolutely vital to this effort, especially when it comes to patients' cell phone and email addresses, which we plan to leverage to conduct centralized reminders for second doses. But as a backup to this plan, you may wish to examine your own capacity to remind patients of the need for a second dose. One of the challenges presented to all of us is reporting vaccinations within 24 hours of administration in accordance with the guidance that we've received thus far. And now this may require some adjustments to your workflows. In fact, I can bet it will require some adjustments and should be integrated into your offsite vaccination plans, whether you enter directly into Nevada WebIZ today, or if you report electronically from your internal systems. So to that point, we're very grateful to have nearly every pharmacy in Nevada submitting electronically via HL7. But I strongly recommend that our HL7 submitters consider internal system readiness. So what do I mean by that? CDC will release codes to represent the new COVID vaccines, manufacturers that maybe we've not had vaccines from before, possibly NDCs, and they will likely ask for submission of specific funding source and patient eligibility combinations, which may not be something that pharmacies are accustomed to. So while the funding source and eligibility codes exist now, we are all still awaiting the release of vaccine-specific codes. So Nevada WebIZ has plans to implement them as soon as they're published, but we also ask that our pharmacy partners plan now for rapid implementation of these codes into your system. So something to keep an eye on there. You've heard a lot about both state allocation and direct federal allocation. We expect that pharmacies that receive vaccine directly from the federal government will still be required to report vaccination data to CDC within the same 24-hour time frame. So I think that's going to be a factor no matter what. It's important to note that even if COVID vaccine is allocated to one of your pharmacies directly by the federal government, Nevada law still requires reporting to Nevada WebIZ. Going back to that widespread use of HL7 submission, I don't expect that we'll have a huge issue with that. That should be something that will be a fairly light lift for all of you, at least getting the data to us once it's entered in your system. Now, if vaccine is allocated to a pharmacy through the state, orders will be placed in Nevada WebIZ, and the process is very user-friendly for those of you that have never done it, and training and support will definitely be provided. Lastly, I want to cover a REDCap system that we're developing to collect some aggregate data. So we'll be asking that you enter on a weekly basis aggregate data into this simple REDCap survey. You'll enter counts of patient by age buckets, which we have yet to define, counts of race, ethnicity, and then priority group is going to be a really important one. We've not been asked to report this to CDC, so we don't have plans to modify Nevada WebIZ to capture that data. However, we feel strongly that that data will help our state monitor progress towards the goal of vaccinating those that we've identified in our tier structures, and may be a vital tool in supporting allocation decisions in the future as we progress through our phases. And I think that's it, and I'll turn it back to you, Shannon.
Awesome, thank you, Mandy. All right, and then I am going to kick it over to Dr. Pam Forrest to walk us through clinical trials. Pam?
Shannon, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine, Pam.
Good, because I'm having connectivity issues today. We expect that you, pharmacists and other healthcare providers, may run into a hesitancy about the COVID-19 vaccines. So we thought we'd go over the clinical trial process with you. As you know, at first, the vaccines are first administered to animals. And if the animals do fine with that vaccine administration, then the companies proceed to clinical trials on humans. And during phase 1 of the clinical trials, 20 to 100 healthy adult volunteers are obtained. And after administration of the vaccine to the volunteers, they look to see if, number one, what dose they should proceed with, and number two, is the vaccine safe? In phases 2 and 3, they progressively enroll more volunteers to receive the vaccine. And during these phases, they look for side effects and the immune response to the vaccine. Next slide, Shannon. During Operation Warp Speed, the process from the beginning to licensure, or EUA, has been shortened. But that doesn't mean that corners are being cut. Safety is still an important issue. So fortunately, at the beginning of the process, the companies already had a mRNA platform to work with. So that shortened the initial phase. Then the clinical trials were compressed. Phase 2 and phase 3 were done at the same time, which saved time. But again, safety was concentrated upon. During the whole time that the clinical trials were being conducted, this vaccine has been manufactured, as you can see with the brown bar, in the accelerated process. In the typical process, companies do not manufacture their vaccine until they get licensure, because they don't want to waste the money producing a vaccine that may not reach licensure. So this time, the vaccine is already being manufactured so that when it is granted an EUA, emergency use authorization, or licensure, they will be able to distribute the vaccine very quickly, rather than waiting for it all to be manufactured. Next slide, Shannon. We listened to a lecture from General Perna, who's in charge of Operation Warp Speed, and he assured us that the financial risk is okay. The government realizes that if these vaccines are not found to be safe and effective, they are going to destroy them. Safety is of utmost importance, and so if these vaccines are not found to be safe or effective, they will be destroyed. Next slide. I think it's also reassuring to know that it's not just the FDA who has a say in whether the vaccine gets licensed or not. All during the clinical trials, a data safety monitoring board, which was composed of independent scientists who do not work for the FDA, they do not work for the federal government. These scientists have been reviewing the clinical trial data that has been produced. Before the FDA recommends a vaccine for licensure, the Vaccine and Related Biologic Product Advisory Committee will meet. And again, these are all people outside of the FDA. I read an article recently where a statistician from the University of Pennsylvania is on the current Vaccine Related Biological Product Advisory Committee, as is a physician who works for the University of Alabama. These are experts in their field. They will be reviewing the the data that's produced from the clinical trials, and they will be advising the FDA whether the vaccine should be licensed or not. So then after the vaccine finally gets licensure or EUA approval, it still will not be used until the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices meets. It's also known as the ACIP. And when the ACIP meets, then they will tell us whether they recommend its use and who it should be used for. Currently, the Pfizer product has been administered, I think, to a person age 16, but no younger children have received the Pfizer product. So this vaccine will definitely not be recommended for children because we don't have any clinical data on it. So after the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices meets, if they say the vaccine is safe and effective, then finally it can be distributed. And that also triggers a lot of other things that will occur. As Mandy talked about WebIZ, the coding for WebIZ won't be available until the ACIP puts its blessing on the product. This is the same approval process that all vaccines go through, our childhood vaccines, our yearly influenza vaccine. So when any of the COVID-19 vaccines finally gets licensure or EUA approval and it's approved by the ACIP, we can be confident that the vaccine is safe and is effective. Next slide.
Thank you, Pam. And I think I failed to mention it at the beginning, but it is our assumption that the initial doses of any vaccine released to the state of Nevada will be an emergency use authorized vaccine. So that is our planning assumption at this time with eventual full FDA licensure. And the last slide here is just a reminder and a big thank you to all of you. We know you guys administer a lot of influenza vaccine in the state of Nevada, and we appreciate you. So I just wanted to throw this on there and thank you for helping us fight this flu season, especially as it's so important while we're in the COVID-19 pandemic. And then beyond that, I just hope that we can help answer your questions and have some further conversation as a group here. So maybe I can turn it over to Heidi if you want to help us with the question piece, Heidi.
Absolutely. Everyone can put questions in chat. That's probably easiest because we have over 200 people on this call. So probably putting your question in chat, and then I can assist with monitoring those and reading them to you, Shannon.
That sounds great. So I look forward to seeing those questions in the chat box.
Shannon, the first question is, how do we enroll for the pandemic provider program?
Perfect. Pam, do you want to take that one?
I can't hear.
Oh, sounds like Pam's having a little connectivity issues. So we will be reaching out to providers as we start this phased approach to COVID-19 vaccination. So we do anticipate that providers will be reached out to specifically with these as we go through this phased response. I would anticipate in the next few months, probably, I don't have an exact timeline for you guys. I mean, this is all a very fluid process, but in the next few months, we will be really beefing up our enrollment and really working through increasing our COVID-19 vaccine providers in the state of Nevada, probably as we tip into 2021. So you will be reached out to. If you have interest in being a COVID-19 vaccine provider, that we did send out a survey through all of our licensing boards earlier this summer. I want to say like in July to gauge interest. We had over 4,000 providers respond to that survey. So we do have that information, and we're going to utilize that to kick us off into provider enrollment as we really start branching off from this specific healthcare workers and critical infrastructure workforce, and really start enrolling a large quantity of immunizing providers. And then we also are able, we also are going to,
you have not entered any numbers.
oh goodness, I hear lots of feedback. I also anticipate that providers will be able to reach out to us, and I can put we established a new email address, so I can put the email address in the chat box here. And folks, if you have a specific interest in enrolling, you can go ahead and shoot us an email. Just know, as I mentioned at the beginning, that we are kind of in this surge situation right now. So we are having to weed through and really focus some of our efforts on those vaccinators that will be vaccinating the critical healthcare workers and the critical infrastructure workforce first, and then we will be opening it up to more providers. But I'll go ahead and put that email address in the chat box.
Shannon, the next question is, will there be any immunization training provided in the near future? And then also pharmacy, or what about pharmacy technicians immunizing?
So just actual how to immunize, is that the question?
It's just, will there be training provided in the near future? They would like to get their staff certified. So
as immunizers, I imagine. So Heidi, I would think that that's the immunization 101. I don't know if you want.
I just put the link in the chat. So on the Immunize Nevada website, there is a page specifically for pharmacists and available trainings. We have both a Nevada-based Immunization 101 training, and then the link to the APHA training is also there. As additional resources come available for pharmacists and pharmacy technicians, we will be adding resources specifically to this page.
And yeah, go ahead, Heidi.
Next question, do you want to talk a little bit about the regs?
Yeah, I'm actually wondering if Dave Wiest would like to talk about the regulations that allow pharmacy technicians to vaccinate. Dave, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, this is Dave. Can you hear me, Shannon?
I can hear you, Dave.
All right, yeah, so yeah, we did do a newsletter about that, which is available on our website, and that's now permanent law that technicians under the direct supervision of pharmacists can vaccinate. They need 1 hour of training on it, which the state has already sent you the link for training that would qualify. Other training that your chain may provide to you should qualify too. And you know how to get a hold of the board. You can get us at our website at bop.nv.gov if you have any questions. But that's now permanent law in Nevada that pharmacy techs under the direction of their pharmacists can vaccinize for any of the vaccines. So hopefully you can help out with the flu shot too. Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you, Dave.
And Shannon, the question follow-up was, when is the next Immunization 101 being held? So for those that aren't aware, that is actually now part 1 is an online module, which we're very excited about. And then part 2 is an in-person training, and we are currently recruiting trainers for that. And so Brianne is the contact and will be available to help schedule that. The next question is storage of vaccines. What will happen if we have a freezer or refrigerator failure? And then should the vaccine be discarded, or are vaccines being tested outside of the 2 to 8 degrees Celsius?
Good storage and handling questions. Glenn, Pam, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, the CDC has not done any testing on the vaccine as far as temperature excursions. We just got an update today. about that situation, and they're doing testing as we speak, but there has been nothing published yet. The vaccine should be stable. Well, actually, we don't know any details about any excursion details on it, so that'll be coming forth. That'll be forthcoming as they continue doing testing on both vaccine types.
Glenn, this is Dave with the Board of Pharmacy. If I can just add, you said it right already. This is a very fluid situation, and we don't have all the answers to the questions. And Shannon already said that resources are an issue. So we request your patience for the state as we go through these. These will be questions that will be answered at the time when they need to be answered. And secondarily, well, Nevada law already requires that drugs have some monitoring program involved with them. But if you're in one of those places that doesn't have the digital monitoring, now's the time to put that in place. If you want to be a vaccine provider, the state's already said that they may take a look exactly how you're monitoring. And so now in this next month is the time to get that in place so you have it so you can print out a month's worth of temperatures, because that's going to be a requirement of the program. And you don't want to wait till you want to do it and then you don't have that program. So a lot of pharmacies already have that through a wireless system, but if you don't have that, you might want to consider getting that in place now, because, and Glenn can say it again, but your expectation is that you may take a look at the system and make sure it meets the requirements of the CDC. I'll kick it back to you, Glenn, on that.
That's correct. Yeah, we will need to approve that monitoring device to make sure that it is within the CDC guidelines. I'm sure most of the ones that have them already are within those guidelines, but anybody that purchases one to put in their units, then we'll probably have to approve it just before you do it.
Shannon, an earlier question was, is Pfizer the main manufacturer of the vaccine at the moment?
My understanding is the two big vaccines that are anticipated to come first are Moderna and Pfizer. So Pfizer's the ultra cold one. Moderna's the frozen one. And then, I mentioned at the beginning that there's 6 in contract with the United States government. That is what we've been told. There are 6. That's what is the increasing amount as we tip into 2021. That is why, because we see more and more of these entering phase 3 clinical trials and out of clinical trials, et cetera. And they have different storage and handling requirements, and we don't know a ton about those other 4 that are forthcoming. We don't know. I think there's a refrigerated one in there, some more frozen ones, but we frankly just don't know. So more coming on that.
Yeah, and Shannon, I think what we do know is that if they start with one manufacturer, they should complete with that manufacturer. Can you talk about that real quickly, please?
Thank you, Dave. Yes. Glenn, Pam, you want to talk about that?
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
Just anybody who receives one presentation of vaccine from one manufacturer has to stick with that one for their second dose.
That's correct. Yeah, the types of vaccine are not interchangeable at all. So if you receive like the ultra cold vaccine from Pfizer, that is what you're going to have to use on the second dose for the patients that received it. So at this time, we're expecting to only see the ultra cold. We don't know when the frozen vaccine or the vaccine B is going to be coming out. We haven't heard much about it yet, but the one that we've been listening about for the last 2-3 weeks has been this ultra cold vaccine. The other thing that I'd forgotten to mention with the ultra cold vaccine is it comes in a package that is packed with dry ice. And the whole thing takes up about 70 pounds. The minimal amount that is in one tray of that container is 975 doses. So that is going to be very difficult for anybody without an ultra cold storage device in place to be able to handle. We have determined in locations in Las Vegas, in Elko, and in Washoe County, the locations that we are able to store this type of vaccine. And so smaller pharmacies, once you're enrolled, and if this is the only vaccine we have at the time, then we will go to those locations and roll out the vaccine to you in person.
And honestly, guys, that's not what we're hoping that we're going to be able to do. That is worst case scenario if that is the only vaccine that's available. Well, hopefully we will have other presentations of vaccine available to us that can be frozen and that we could direct ship to your location. Yeah. So, but just know that there are plans in place for ultra cold vaccine. I think that's the big message at this point in time.
Shannon, we have a couple temperature monitoring questions. So is there a list of approved temperature monitoring devices? And then when will that approval process take place?
So for basically when you get this vaccine, you'll need to get a data logger that will accommodate or freezer temperatures, and one that may accommodate the refrigerator temperatures. So you probably need to buy two or just one for the frozen vaccine. And that can be done through several companies out there. I can provide a list at a later time through Dave as to which types of monitors can be purchased and where you can get them at.
And Glenn, I'm not sure, I apologize if you already covered this. Did you cover if there has to be a separate freezer or a freezer fridge combo is allowable?
The CDC strongly recommends that it be a separate refrigerator and a separate freezer. So a combination refrigerator freezer, they do not hold temperatures well enough for this vaccine. So they need to be standalone units.
Excellent. Thank you. That was a question in the chat. We have two questions on the 2-dose series. What would the time interval be between the first and second doses? And then what do we do if the second dose is not available?
Sorry, trying to unmute myself. My menu disappears there for a minute. So we have been told anywhere between 21 and 28 days, depending on the presentation. So all of that will be forthcoming on the specific presentation that the pharmacy will be receiving. You'll have specific guidance on the interval. And at the beginning, when our vaccine allocation is short, we will be ensuring that that second dose is always available to you. So if that's the situation that we're in, which I'm not sure that we will be in that situation when we enroll pharmacy partners into the program, I'm expecting our allocation to be larger at that time when our pharmacy partners are being enrolled. So we won't have to be tracking that to that degree potentially at that point, but that will be our responsibility to make sure that we have that available for the second dose. So we're just counting it twice at the state level at this point.
We have a question on pharmacy technicians. Will they need a BLS and or an ACLS certificate?
So this is Dave Wiest. I'll take that question. So while the board encourages anybody working in a pharmacy to have CPR, the pharmacists that are doing the direct oversight of the technician is required to have the CPR training. The technician themselves, again, it's encouraged, but was not mandated. And that was really the board's thought process on that, was that there may not be enough training to go around, and we just wanted to make sure one person was trained. So a technician will not be doing the vaccinating without the direct supervision of a pharmacist, and that pharmacist would be the person we would rely. That said, an individual company may have a policy that the technicians need to be certified, and that would be okay with the state too.
Next question, Shannon. Will the vaccine be available through the regular suppliers, or will they have to order directly from a manufacturer?
So at the beginning, for the foreseeable future, COVID-19 vaccine will only be available through us or through the federal government if the corporate pharmacy has contracted with the federal government. So pharmacies will be going into Nevada WebIZ and will be ordering COVID-19 vaccine. That order will go to us at the immunization program, at the Nevada State Immunization Program. We will approve that order, and that order will be then direct shipped from a centralized distribution center to the pharmacy itself. So that is the way that we are anticipating this to roll out. I would imagine eventually, and if this is a big eventually, it's somewhere in the far future, COVID-19 vaccine will be an ordered vaccine, like a privately purchased vaccine that you guys would handle every day. But that's not where we are right now. All of this vaccine is being supplied by the federal government, either through the federal government directly in a contract with a large chain pharmacy, or through an agreement to participate with the Nevada State Immunization Program.
Yeah, and I'll add on Dave Wiest for the call. The WebIZ is going to be so important through this, and and I'll reiterate that if you don't understand all the things that can happen through that, there will be training provided by that when the time comes from the state people that are on the call. We do expect that McKesson will have the contract to potentially help the federal government distribute it, and so at the last board meeting, we did license 3 facilities that it potentially could come through. So when the time comes, it looks like McKesson may play a role. So thanks, Shannon.
Yeah, McKesson is who we normally utilize. So I think that's who the CDC contracts with. So all of the vaccines for children vaccine that comes in through the state, that's all McKesson. So it's going to be a similar system to what already exists.
Thanks, Shannon.
Shannon, it doesn't look like there's any other questions in the chat. Okay, very good. Well, I am going to put my email here in the chat box. I think my big message out to all of our partners today is just that we're here. We may not know every single answer to every single question, but we're here. We will work through the details with you, reach out to us, and also just know that we are working through all of these pieces. And if our response is delayed, we apologize for that, and we will be in touch with you in the very near future. So happy to be with you today. I really appreciate your guys' time, and please reach out with your questions. Okay, thank you very much, you guys.